Well, thank you very much for having me here today. My name is David Cornish, and I'm an EV product specialist at Techniche. We focus on helping companies get the best performance out of their critical assets, whether that's an EV charger, a coffee machine, or a car wash. Techniche products are used in over 40,000 locations in just under 40 countries around about 5 continents by major mobility retailers and convenience stores such as BP, Aral, Shell, and Q8. Techniche EV, which is our product for charge point owners and operators, helps our customers improve the availability, reliability, and uptime of their charging infrastructure. Now, this in turn delivers an improved experience for the end users, who are the EV drivers. It secures revenue and helps build a stronger brand for their business. Now, we help deliver more than 500,000 trouble-free charging sessions for EV drivers every month. And since launching Techniche EV, we've been on a mission to work with charge point operators to understand what's important to them, how we can use their charge point data to improve their business, their revenue, and customer experience metrics by building a more reliable and dependable charging network. In today's short session, I'm going to explain how charge point operators can use that session and analytics data to improve the customer experience. And there's a Q&A session that's scheduled after my presentation, but if you'd like to pick up on any of the points that I bring up, or if you have any further questions, then head over to the Techniche stand in the exhibition space over there, where my colleagues and I will be more than happy to talk to you. Now, the EV industry is still growing faster each year. For around about this time last year, the UK had roughly 42,000 public chargers in operation. And the Netherlands had around about 123,000 public, semi-public, and fast chargers. Now we're just over 12 months later, and the UK has grown by around about 59%, installing just over 25,000 new public chargers, while the Netherlands now stands at an impressive 123,000 chargers, 145,000 chargers even. And as a committed EV driver, I am delighted to see that this rate of growth is much needed to support the new numbers of EVs that are joining our roads. However, the greater the number of EV charge points to manage, the greater the complexity. So it's not exactly breaking news, I guess, but as an industry, we do have a major challenge to address. And that's that EV charging does have a reliability problem. And the theme of this year's Intercharge Network Conference is, after all, kind of charging towards reliability. And over the course of the conference in all areas, we've heard reliability mentioned repeatedly. I'm sure if I did ask the EV drivers amongst us to raise their hands if they'd ever experienced a problem charging their car away from their home or their workplace, then I'd probably be looking at a sea of hands. Indeed, around about 1 in 10 EV drivers report that they regularly experience issues charging publicly. And from my own anecdotal experience, in the 20,000 kilometers that I've driven an EV in the last 12 months, including 2,000 in the last 2 weeks in France, I've used public charging maybe 15 times, and I've experienced issues in 8 of those occasions. And I've experienced chargers that are just offline, authorization issues, interrupted sessions, as well as having basic customer service issues, such as having or not having the charger IDs on the charger, making it really hard to actually start a charge in the first place. And of course, in a lot of these instances, there's never really a kiosk or a shop to pop into to ask anybody for help. All that you're often left to rely on is a QR code, an app that's often unique to the charging brand, and kind of weak mobile signals, usually in a dreary shopping mall car park. It is far from a great customer experience. Now you compare that to filling a fuel vehicle. Charging an EV at a public charge point can be complicated, it can be frustrating, time-consuming, and prone to errors. From arriving at the charger to finding that it's out of action, to returning after a coffee break to find that your charge was interrupted and you need to try again, and maybe give Starbucks another €5. So even for me, as a strong advocate for the transition to EV and greener mobility solutions, it can be difficult to dispute the poor reliability of public charging infrastructure. And that EV charging reliability problem goes beyond the anecdotal evidence. There's data from studies such as a report from Harvard Business School in June of this year that put charger availability at just 78%. Or there was a Californian study which determined that only 73% of chargers that they analysed could deliver a charge lasting more than 2 minutes. Now those all back up the experiences that we hear day to day from EV drivers. Therefore, it's no really a wonder that the biggest anxiety of EV drivers continues to be charger availability. It's been a little while since it was, do we have the range to reach our destination in our cars? And now it's, will the chargers be working when I get there? And will I be able to get home again? Earlier this year at Techniche, we conducted a study into the reasons that EV chargers break down. We looked at a subset of our installed charger base, analysing data from around 5,000 EV chargers across some of our European customer sites in the UK, Ireland, Netherlands, Germany and Spain over the last year. The chargers were all basically 150, 175 kilowatt DC fast chargers. They were less than 5 years old. They were located in public locations, mainly forecourts, retail parks and supermarkets. And around 70% of those charger breakdowns could be fixed remotely. Now, whether that was a reset, whether it was a software upgrade, a configuration change, or something similar to that. But that meant that about 30% of the breakdowns required a technician visit to the charger to actually fix the problem. Whether that's replacing a component, resetting an emergency stop button, switching out a connector, or something similar to get that charger back online again. Now, it's this 30% that causes the biggest headache for operators, resulting in slow repairs, unwanted downtime, and a bad experience for drivers. So, without further ado, we're going to start with the top 5 reasons that contractors have to visit a charger. Straight in at number 1 are the power errors and failures. Now, nearly a quarter of all technician visits to chargers are related to grid, substation, or battery-backed storage failures. Now, it's a new category for our customers that they're monitoring, and with good reason. After all, reliable power to chargers is fairly fundamental to charging an EV. The second largest cause are the payment terminals and card readers, with just over a fifth of all technician visits. Payment terminals are often the bane of the EV driver's experience. They seem to have more random failures with kind of nonsense errors than anything else in that kind of ecosystem. They can often be fixed with a remote reset, but they often need swapping out as well. And with governments, such as the UK, mandating that payment terminals on and card readers on the majority of public chargers, this is an area that does need real focus, ensuring that the terminals are fully integrated into the monitoring and maintenance workflows. Now, interrupted charging sessions and repeatedly low peak and average charging rates make up about 20% of technician callouts and are a common frustration for EV drivers. As you plug into a fast charger, you come back 20 minutes later expecting your car to be fully charged or nearly fully charged, only to find that it's trickling along about a tenth of what you'd expect it to. Now, of course, battery condition, state of charge, ambient temperature, and a whole host of other conditions do affect the rate that power is delivered at, but it is often a charger hardware fault that will prevent high-speed charging even in ideal conditions. Now, one example that we had is one of our customers had a type of 50 kilowatt charger that would often have a faulty power module, so it would not be capable of charging above 25 kilowatts, but they also weren't registering as faulty in the back office system. So without kind of session and transaction analysis, no one was really any the wiser. Now, surprisingly, mechanical and electrical defects causing chargers to break down isn't the top reason that causes technicians to visit, with only 18% of breakdowns coming under this category. From an electrical and mechanical point of view, the chargers are pretty reliable, but like everything else, they will fail from time to time. Now, this figure does also include units other than the main, does include hardware other than the main unit itself, such as the display screens, connectors, and cables, and that kind of thing. And finally, at number 5, the comms dropouts. Comms dropouts are part and parcel of operating an EV charging network, and they will happen from time to time. But sometimes the chargers just drop offline and they won't come back again, or they have persistent errors with authorizations that leave drivers frustrated. So 13% of our technician visits relate to this family of errors. The study kind of indicates that there is quite a lot of work that still needs to be done on improving the grid infrastructure, with power issues being the single largest reason for callouts. Now, this issue could, of course, be further compounded during the rollout of chargers to more remote or rural locations, as governments tend to push for charging coverage equality, or the installation of power-hungry rapid chargers in urban areas. Both often present a power both often present a challenge for power delivery. In the meantime, better confidence in the reliability of EV charging can be gained by automating as much of the maintenance process as possible to return faulty chargers to service as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, for many years now, the maintenance of EV charging ecosystem has been somewhat of an afterthought, especially in terms of technology. Now, there are help desk teams that typically monitor dashboards. They consult myriad spreadsheets. They take manual notes. They send emails and phone calls and chase-ups. It can often take days just to get the right people and teams notified that there is a problem, and that's before anybody actually even looks at a charger itself. Or charge station management system, the CSMS, obviously that's the software platform used for operating and controlling the EV charger network. And they're pretty good at giving a snapshot of what the charging network is doing, which chargers are being used, how much power is being used, and how much revenue is being produced. Some charge station management systems will tell you which connectors or chargers are in an in-fault status, and the fewer still will surface vendor error codes or present detailed fault information to you in a clear and concise manner. What about issues with chargers that don't present with clear and concise fault error codes? As far as the charge station management system is concerned, everything's kind of okay. The chargers are online, they're being used, sessions and transactions are successful, and revenue's being generated. So as far as they're concerned, that's kind of green lights across the board. So what's kind of wrong with that? Thinking back to some of my own poor charging experiences over the last kind of 12 months, in some of those situations, the charge point operator probably would have thought that everything was okay. I'd started charging, I'd finished charging, and I paid for it as well. But as a customer trying to get on with my journey, it's very frustrating. It does tend to point to a common oversight in the management of EV charging stations. The reliance on basic operational metrics and signals such as charger availability, session success, and revenue generation as the indicators of network health and efficiency. While these metrics are essential for day-to-day operations, they barely scratch the surface of what data can reveal about the performance and reliability of charging stations. And as a charge point operator, for those amongst us, they might be confident that you know the uptime of your charging network and that your uptime percentage meets any client contractual obligations or government regulations. But what does uptime really mean? What does uptime really mean, and how does that translate into your driver's experience of using you or your client's chargers? Now, uptime of EV supply equipment is often calculated from the stream of messages sent from the charger to that central charge station management system. In extremely simple terms, if those messages don't indicate that there's an error, then the charger is up. Uptime is important for evaluating the reliability of services. High uptime is often an indicator of a well-designed system with efficient maintenance processes. However, uptime doesn't tell the whole story. Uptime doesn't account for chargers which could technically be up, but are suffering from issues that affect a user's experience, such as the reduced power output, payment terminal problems, and those kind of things. Availability, on the other hand, considers both the uptime and the downtime of a system, as well as those in-between errors between the total charger failure, maybe things like planned maintenance windows, meaning that a charge is unavailable. It also considers issues which impact chargers that register as up, but that prevent drivers from charging, such as smashed display screens, cracked connectors, split cables, all of those kind of things. So availability accounts for not only total charger failure, but also considers any time that a charger is not fully operational. Tracking charger availability provides a more complete picture of a charging network's functional performance and reliability than uptime alone. And this is highlighted in a recent study by Charger Help, where it has shown that more than 10% of chargers that registered as up were actually incapable of delivering a charge because they were unavailable. So, while regulatory bodies might be interested in a network's uptime, what matters most to EV drivers is that the chargers are available when they want to charge. Now, the EV community is still relatively small, But this group of car owners is typically more tech savvy and are more likely to share experiences, both good and bad, on apps and forums and social media, meaning that poor experiences are visible for all. EV drivers will often use apps such as ZapMap, PlugShare, or a better route planner to find their next on-the-go charge, especially for those much longer journeys. And as with any poor customer experience, EV drivers are much more likely to leave a negative review than a positive one. And that's why it's essential for CPOs to know which of their chargers are available, why they aren't available, and how they can get their chargers back online and back in service as quickly as possible. Now, these apps can deliver business to chargers, but they can just as easily drive customers away. So for single charger, location, or brand is shown to be anything less than reliable or safe, and EV drivers will avoid it and not come back. Kind of backed up a little bit by a study from PwC's report, The Future of Customer Experience, which says that 1 in 3 consumers, it's 32%, will walk away from a brand that they love after just one bad experience. Now, whether through roaming agreements with e-mobility service providers or from drivers paying directly via a charger payment terminal, a decent proportion of a CPO's revenue model can be based on selling charging sessions. And if chargers are unavailable, particularly those at premium charging locations, then there's an obvious and immediate impact on the revenue as well as the longer-term brand impact. Now, most charging sessions are obviously priced per kilowatt hour. And that price per kilowatt hour is determined not only by the basic cost of the electricity, but also factors in the transaction costs, site rental charges, revenue sharing agreements, customer service, help desk overheads, and maintenance spend, amongst a whole load of other things. Maintenance spend covers both the scheduled and unscheduled maintenance. For example, a lot of the DC ultra-fast chargers often require a planned annual inspection, during which they may change a filter or something along those lines. That time of expenditure can be budgeted for. It's pretty easy to do that. However, unscheduled repairs to fix the out-of-service chargers are much less straightforward to predict. Automating and triaging of work orders and ensuring that repairs are fixed timely can significantly improve the availability of chargers for drivers while reducing the impact of the out-of-service chargers on a CPO's revenue. Now, Technicia's heritage is in fuel retail. Technicia's heritage is in fuel retail, and we do know a thing or two about the forecourt maintenance. So if a pump breaks at a fuel station, firstly, it's not really that big of a deal because there are usually at least 8 or 10 more that you can pick from. And if you were to go back the next day, or even later the same day, it's highly likely that that pump will be fixed, back in action, and dispensing fuel again. Now, fuel retailers understand how critical reliable pumps are for their customers, their reputation, and their bottom line. So our fuel retail customers already enjoy an annual uptime of more than 99% for their fuel dispensing assets. Of course, they've had about 100 years to get there, which is just a little bit longer than the EV industry has. But when an EV charger breaks, it's often down for days or weeks, and there's usually only 1 or 2 others that you can use. And they might be out of action or in use, meaning that drivers might have to hunt around for another one nearby or limp onwards, feeling increasingly anxious, which is not really something that ICE drivers have to worry about that often. Today's EV chargers are amazing high-tech devices, and they are getting smarter all the time. They've benefited from huge amounts of R&D that really drive the innovation and to improve that charging experience. But the supporting technology hasn't really kept pace, and the tools used to optimize, analyze, and manage the maintenance are often immature, and that's if they've even been thought about at all. Relying on uptime measurements from the charge station management system alone means that CPOs are missing out on a range of availability insights that could be used to improve the customer experience and grow revenue. So, like the iceberg, lurking below the surface in all that session and transaction data from chargers is a whole host of useful, insightful, and more importantly, actionable information. So even when a charge station management system indicates that everything is operating smoothly, there are probably underlying issues that, if left unaddressed, would lead to bigger problems. And combing through this massive amount of session and transaction data to identify anomalies and patterns plays a critical role in identifying such issues. This deep dive into the data reveals issues that do not trigger an in-fault status or error code in the back-end system, but they could significantly impact charger performance, customer experience, and satisfaction. Now, these issues could seemingly include successful charging sessions that only lasted a couple of minutes, or that delivered less than a kilowatt hour of power, or they had an unusually low peak power output, or usage patterns that deviate from their norm. And these occurrences may not flag an error in the charge station management system, and as a one-off, they don't necessarily indicate a problem with the charger. After all, there are so many different pieces of equipment in the loop when charging an EV, now including the car itself, that a session occasionally failing is to be expected. It's not ideal. It will frustrate the customer, but it will happen from time to time. But what about when a pattern emerges from the noise? So what about a charger whose sessions often only last a couple of minutes? Or a charger that regularly only delivers a kilowatt hour of power? Or a 50 kilowatt charger that stops peaking above 25 kilowatts? Now, they're all deemed successful sessions and transactions, but they're anything but successful as far as your customers are concerned. And I use these because these are ones that I've experienced in the last 12 months. Surfacing these issues and others like them can allow charge point operators to take action, whether that's on-site inspection to just see what is going on with that charger, or an investigation by an internal team for a more in-depth analysis of the data so the issue can be resolved before it becomes terminal and the unit fails completely. This level of detailed analysis supports not only immediate operational improvements, but also strategic decisions regarding infrastructure expansion, charger placement, and technology upgrades. By identifying and rectifying the subtle issues that degrade the user experience, operators can ensure higher usage rates, increase customer loyalty, and ultimately, greater revenue generation. By moving beyond basic operational metrics to understand the nuances of each charging session, operators can ensure that their networks are not just operational, but truly optimized for the best possible service. After all, customer experience and satisfaction are key to a thriving EV charging network. So I mentioned right at the start that Technique EV helps charge point operators improve the availability, reliability, and uptime of their charging infrastructure. So you might be thinking that Technique EV is a charge station management system, but it's not. Instead, Technique EV integrates with the charge station management system, and it kind of starts where it kind of ends. It will take the data from the CSMS and addresses the gaps that are often found in the terms of the charge point analysis, optimization, and maintenance. And it will monitor that charge station management system and the underlying OCPP data streams for issues and errors, triaging them and suggesting or taking an appropriate corrective action as defined by the business processes. Now, it can remove the often complex and time-consuming manual processes by introducing automation, and will get the chargers working again in a much shorter time frame than ever before. Now, we're all about using automation to help the EV driver experience. For example, using intelligent resets for faulty chargers. Quite often, glitches or errors with chargers can be solved with a remote reset. After all, the chargers are smart devices, and with a lot of smart devices, the old IT standby of turn them off and on again is often the first step that OEMs will recommend when resolving many problems. Now, with these intelligent resets, we see around about a 70% success rate. That's pretty good. That's chargers that are back online automatically without any human interaction is a pretty great outcome. Of course, you need to log all of the resets and surface alerts for chargers that are outliers so that you can check on ones that require too many resets in order to keep them up and running. Through this feature alone, one of our customers saves time equivalent to 1.5 full-time employees just from remote resets. And that's a decent amount of resource that they can redeploy to other areas of their business. Of course, if the reset isn't successful, then we can carry on automating the resolution of the issue. And that could include raising a work order for a manufacturer to warranty work, dispatching a third-party contractor to replace a component, or triggering an escalation to an internal team for a deeper investigation, all following industry best practices and configured to internal, business, operational, and health and safety processes. And alongside those automated resets, one of the most common limitations that we see with our work with charge point operators in getting chargers up and running again are human resources. Now there's the availability of their staff. All too often, investigations, triages, and remote resets are delayed due to staff availability. Now, whether that's their normal 9 to 5 working hours, their holidays, their sicknesses, or even their lunch times, they all result in a delay to actioning problems with chargers. And therefore, that leads to decreased uptime, decreased availability, and decreased customer satisfaction, amongst others. So it's good that platforms like TechnicheEV, they don't sleep. They work 24/7, they work nights, they work weekends, they don't need a holiday, they don't even need a lunchtime. And so if a glitch occurs with a charger at the most awkward time, and TechnicheEV knows that what action should be taken, especially if that action is a remote reset, it'll do it there and then, and nobody will get woken up in the middle of the night. I hope I've given some small insight into how the data generated by these high-tech devices can be used to improve customers' experience. How by analysing charging session and transaction data, you can move to a more predictive approach to diagnosing faults and resolving them before they impact the end user. And in process, build reliability into your network. That's good news for customers, it's good news for your brands. Having a product like TechnicheEV, analysing and monitoring your chargers, managing your maintenance activities, and giving you first-class access to asset management capabilities can be a real boost to any charge point operator, big or small. One of our more recent customers, that's a primarily AC charger operator who operates a lot of apartment blocks and hotels, they saw more than a 5% boost in their availability metrics after just 30 days of using TechnicheEV. And that was an extra 250,000 hours or 10,000 days of availability in just 30 days. So, what's coming next? Solving plug-in EV charging is today's problem, and it's tomorrow's too. But what could the next year, or 5 years, or 10 years look like? There are loads of other EV-based technologies in use and being tested around the world. We've heard about some of them during the conference and seen some of them as well. Plug and charge eliminates the payment terminal interactions, and that's great for me because that's where most of my problems have been with my own EV. That creates a smoother charging experience for EV drivers. There's battery swapping. It currently works really well for scooters in India, China, and Indonesia. Induction charging had a 5-year pilot in my home city of Milton Keynes back in the UK. And then there's vehicle to X, where the energy stored in EV batteries can be fed back into the grid, are used in different applications at different times. Whatever the future holds in the terms of how we power our vehicles, we know that the customer expectations will become ever more demanding. And so, as the sector develops, ensuring the reliability of EV charging infrastructure and delivering a superior customer experience should be the focus for charging station owners and operators. Thank you very much for listening. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any questions?
Hi, David. So what I found very interesting was the numbers, what are like the biggest issues that lead to technicians being dispatched. Can you say a bit more about the source? So like where did you get this data from and for which market does it apply? Do you maybe see more or fewer power problems in the UK versus mainland Europe, for example?
So all the data came from our charger install base, so it came from those connections that we have to the charge station management system, to the underlying OCPP data streams. We're able to kind of segment that out and determine what components and what problems that relies to. As for the segregation of the as to how the how that data is split per market. I don't have that to hand, but I do have that back at my office because we put it all together. So I can send the information to you if that would be helpful.
Would be great, yeah.
Certainly.
And one more question. What do you use as trigger points for automated resets? Is it just certain vendor error codes, or do you also have other trigger points?
It's a whole combination. It can also vary per what the customer kind of requirements are. Very often it is vendor error codes because they are often for vendor error code, 1, 2, 3 for an Alpatronic charger. The first step is reset it. So we'll do that. We'll check for are any of the connectors in use? If they are, okay, we'll pause it, we'll put it to another queue to be looked at later on. If it is, we'll restart it there and then wait the 3 or 4 minutes for the boot up time to kind of happen. And if it's happened, if it's back up and running, great, we're on our way. If not, then we'll carry on with the next step for it. But it's not just the error codes that we'll use. We'll also use some of that kind of that deeper session stuff. So the short sessions, the power outages, the comms outages, and those kind of dropouts there. It's usually a good first port of call for any of the issues where it's not fundamentally hardware related, is to just try and turn it off and on again. We're seeing about a 70% success rate with that, which is awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, David. Thanks for the presentation. I got a question regarding, you were talking about the self-healing mechanism. Afterwards, we are going to this preventive, all kind of actions to actually avoid that something happens. So where do you see Technische in between your customer and maybe a hardware supplier? So which role would you actually play in between?
So we see, at the moment, we see ourselves that we sit between we sit between our the hardware vendor and the customers. We sit between there. We're doing some work with some OEMs at the moment who are taking a greater role in doing warranty work and service work for their customers, where they're starting to use our platform as well for their own kind of purpose as well. So we're kind of trying to get the kind of that whole loop there. So you've got the issues that occur at the customer site, so we can get that feedback on the cause and the remedy, that root cause analysis, back to the manufacturer at the end, which is something that we see quite a lot of them are missing at the moment.
Other questions?
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I also have a question regarding, in your analysis, did you see any differences in the charger types? Like, did you see, could you analyze if particular charger brands have a big impact on the availability and how, or is it, because, I mean, obviously in your chart you're showing that the power outage, for example, is the most important reason. So of course that doesn't have anything to do with the charger manufacturers. And the second thing is, how do you measure the power outage? Like how do you detect that with a heartbeat, OCPP heartbeat, and if it's gone, it's...
So there's a whole different mechanism for determining what the outage are. There's a whole rules-based engine with some machine learning and stuff that's on the that's on the back of that. As for the first part of the question, we do keep all the data is segmented on an individual issue basis, so that we're able to we don't aggregate that kind of data in any way when we're within the platform, so that we're able to compare models, we're able to compare brands, but also brands in different customers as well. So there might be, a lot of people are going to be using Kempower equipment or Alpatronic equipment, so you can compare how they're installed in different regions, in different locations, as to whether things, I mean, even not so much in the EV world, but in a fuel heritage world, even the altitude that things are installed at can affect how they perform. So we need to be able to do that for kind of all of the asset types, and that can include the EV chargers.
And just a general rule of thumb, do you see any impact? So is the same charger installed somewhere else with a different CPMS connected, because you're not the CPMS, you just kind of tap in. Is there a difference, or it doesn't make a difference? At
the moment, that hasn't made a difference. I'm sure at some point it will do, as some start to get more evolved than others and are able to do other things. But at the moment, that doesn't seem to have played an impact in anything.
More questions? If that's not the case. David, you will be a little bit around, right? So
Yeah, I'll be around here or over at the Technique stand, which is just over there where my colleagues and I can answer any further questions that you have. Thank you very much.
thank you.